All right. Well, Mr. Vice President, are you there?
Yeah, good morning, Jomo.
Excellent. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jomo Stewart here at the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. It is right around 8 a.m. Here on March 1st, 2022. Years zipping right along. Our guests today are ConocoPhillips, actually Vice President Ben Stevens of ConocoPhillips, here to give us an update regarding ConocoPhillips, its activities on the North Slope, and particularly the Willow Project, which has been much in the news the last several days. Just a reminder, so I will make a note. I took the liberty for my group of inviting the Chamber of Commerce to go ahead and participate with us if they were interested, because I know that Mr. President's time is limited. So just as a note on process, we're a little less formal here at the Energy for All Alaska Task Force. So as I noted in the chat box, our custom is that you can go ahead and lob questions in the chat, or that you may simply unmute and ask your questions as we move through the presentation and the discussion. We like to actually have a discussion here at FEDC. So please do know that and feel free. But beyond that, the floor is yours, Mr. Vice President. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. We got kind of a Conoco team effort here. I'm in Valdez this morning, and then in Anchorage, driving the presentation is Rebecca Boys, our Director of Communication. So we appreciate the chance to come talk to you in Fairbanks about the activities we have planned for the North Slope this year, and then of course about the plans for the future in the producing units, as well as hopefully in the development units that we have as we move further westward into the NPRA. So those of you who don't know me, I'm joined ConocoPhillips actually a year ago today. Just prior to that, I was with Governor Dunleavy as Chief of Staff. And I spent many years working for a salt chuck company, managing their marine fuel distribution company. A long-time Alaskan, fishing, spent some time in the legislature in the early 2000s.
Yes, to me, sir, you'll always be President Ben Stevens, yeah. Mr. Senate President.
Anyway, I really appreciate your time and attention this morning. So let's go to the next slide, Rebecca. Is she there? Oh, there we go. So the cautionary statement that ConocoPhillips Corporate makes us say every time, there's a lot of words there. Essentially, I'll wrap it up and to say that whatever I say may not come true, and it may not be true. And if it is, don't hold me accountable. So that's the cautionary statement. So we like to start off the year, with really the number one objective of ConocoPhillips is to make sure everybody goes home safe every night. We're very proud that 21 was a very active year, and we ended up with our second best safety record. As you can see, 2020 was the best safety record, which is really quite a phenomenal feat in itself, because during the pandemic year, they laid down all the rigs and removed a bunch of people off the North Slope. And then at the end of 20, they started it back up again. And then in 21, we had a very busy year with Alpine expansion, a lot of turnarounds that took place, and a lot of delayed maintenance that carried over from 20 into 21. So we're extremely proud of the record for 21, and moving into 22. Again, safety is the number one priority we have with ConocoPhillips in the field, and our contractors and many of you guys' companies, we know that follows the same rigor and protocols for safety, and so we appreciate that as we all work together on the slope and really in the harshest and most challenging conditions of most onshore development. So let's go to the next slide, please. So real quickly, we want to wrap up 21. The average per barrel price in 21 ended up at $71 a barrel. 20 was about $54 a barrel. So we see some stabilization in 21. We saw stabilization in the commodity price. Our average production for ConocoPhillips in 21 was about 196,000 barrels a day, which is good. And fortunately for this year, we're actually projecting about 208,000 barrels a day. So for the first time in many years, we're actually projecting an increase in per barrel per day production over the course of the year. And through the fourth quarter, the books have not been closed on 21, but we invested just a little under $1 billion in capital. And it's for, I think, the 7th year in a row, we've invested over $1 billion in capital in projects on the North Slope, which is really, we're extremely confident and proud of that fact, because even through the volatility of the commodity prices in 17, 18, and then starting the stabilization in 19, ConocoPhillips was pretty constant in that $1 billion investment. And we see that $1 billion investment on an annualized basis in developed fields continuing on for the next 5 to 10 years. Also, 21 was a turnaround in terms of revenue. So we paid about 1.1 billion in taxes to this, in royalties to the state, and an additional 300 million went to the federal government. So it was about 1.4 billion in taxes in 21. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned before, 22 is a continuous investment. ConocoPhillips continues, like all industries, and specifically in the oil industry, they focus on low cost base assets and moving towards lower cost of production. And to achieve that, we're engaging with stakeholders, and stakeholders are residents of the North Slope, stakeholders, the state of Alaska, the federal government, the regulators, and also the contractors and all the people that help us as we move forward in these projects, in keeping that infrastructure, the integrity of the infrastructure safe, and making sure that the oil flows in a safe manner in terms of people, and that there's no incidents. So it's safety, it's the integrity of the assets, and it's the people, and it's the cost, so really the focus. And so we've got a lot of things going on in the North Slope. Many of you have heard of going on 26, the extended reach drilling rig at Fjord West. It's working. It's been some challenging challenges, no question about that project. It's sort of a going into new frontiers in terms of the length and the depth that rig has reached, and we're happy to say that it's working. It's been a lot of challenges along the way, but that is a monster rig. It just TD'd at, I think, 29,000 feet to the reservoir. So that's a long way. Doyon 25 is working at GMT2, and it's really doing well. We're in the drilling now the 7th well of a 36 well program on that pad in the NPRA, and it's producing above expectation. So that continues on, and like I said, we're on number 7 out of 36. So there's about a 4-year drilling program involved with the development of the GMT2 pad. The Alpine expansion, really what that was is increased capacity at the Alpine Central Processing Facility in terms of power, in terms of gas processing facility, and excuse me, and a big slug catcher to be able to receive and process that oil from GMT2. GMT2 is a production pad facility. It doesn't have processing, so all that GMT2 product is going to be processed through the Alpine facility, put in the Alpine pipeline, and then transported east over to Pump Station 1. There's the Nuna development that's underway, and it's going to AFE, so it's authorized for expenditure. That project is going to be kicking off later this year. They're building ice roads to it now to start drilling that program. That's, many of them remember, that's the old Kalis project that ConocoPhillips acquired when Kalis left the state. And then there's another Narwhal development, which is a shallow development. Actually, it's in the Kapark unit called Coyote that we're very excited about. And that's another development that we're in flowback and testing on those wells. That's new reservoir new oil that's being drilled from existing gravel. So that's just going to be a real addition for the state because it's on state land. And then Narwhal also is in the combination of the Colville River unit and the Park River unit, and it's again on state land, and it's about an 8 to 10 year development cycle on that. So these are all from projects and in units that are producing now. So there's just a lot going on that ConocoPhillips has. And then of course there's Eastern News, which is in the northeast portion of the Park area. And many of you that have been following the industry for a while know that Eastern News is a viscous reservoir that keeps it's on the build out, and so we're still in testing and assessment there. So there's 5 big projects that are in development. There's 2 projects that are really ongoing drilling almost to production, and then of course we have the Willow Project, which is to the west. So all these other projects are east of the Colville River. Next slide, please.
Actually, sir, if you don't mind, while we're still on this one. So good news,
Sure,
though, again, on those projects that are on state land versus federal land. Again, the state gets a lot more bang from those projects on a cash to treasury basis, correct?
That's correct. So the state land, they get royalty, 12.5% royalty, and most of the times between 12.5% and 16% royalty, and then they get production tax. And then when you move to federal land, the royalty reverts to the landowner. And so when we go into the NPRA, there's a combination of landowners between, it could be, the village of Wixit, Kupik, ASRC, and the federal government. So the royalty piece, the production piece, and the surface property tax, and of course the corporate income tax still channels to the state, but the royalty channels to the surface landowner.
And of course, the benefit of having continued throughput in the TAPS line.
Yeah, and then that's correct. And then but anytime you put more barrels in TAPS, it benefits everybody because it lowers the tariff per barrel for all shippers, and it just benefits the whole production network. That's correct. Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Next slide, please, Rebecca. So, again, 21, going back to 21, the company can't sort of go through that milestone without recognizing, Park is the 2nd largest oil field in North America, certainly the 2nd largest in Alaska, 40 years of responsible development. Many of you remember, December 13th, 81, when it came on, right after Prudhoe Bay, it was estimated 1.6 billion barrels. It's produced to date over 2.5 billion, and it's still producing close to 90,000 barrels a day. So that's the field that just keeps on giving the gift. And a lot of those projects I spoke about in the previous slide are still in the Park unit. So it's really an amazing geophysical structure subsurface that they just continue to find new resource. And so ConocoPhillips, again, is, it's a highlight. It's sustainable development. It's responsible development. It's continuing to implement best management practices. And ConocoPhillips is extremely proud. We operate about 95% ownership we operate the whole field, but we have about 95% ownership in it. Next slide, please.
Actually, that is quite a great milestone, sir.
It really is.
I didn't realize it had been going that long.
Yeah. So
just a reminder. Oh, excuse me, sir. Just a reminder for the assemblage. Again, I'm happy to indulge my own curiosity, but just know that you can indulge yours. If there's any questions, if you need any clarification, please do chime in. Mr. Stevens is happy to answer those questions.
Sure, I'm happy to. I can't see the chat or the flag, so someone just sort of. So if someone just sort of narrates the chat, if they want to do it that way, I'm happy to
Yes,
answer.
sir.
But this to me is one of the favorite slides because it really gives you a visual as well as a commitment. So down at the bottom is the amount of capital that the company has invested, as I said, the last 5 years. So you can see 17, 18, and 19. And if you remember that 17 and 18, they were near the bottom of the latest price cycle, but the company continued to invest the 17, 18, and 19. That's really the build out of the GMT2 project. And so, GMT2 now we're in 22 and it's going to be coming online. It's going to be continuing about an additional 30,000 barrels a day into the production off the North Slope. And so it's just sort of, I think it really highlights the amount of money and the amount of time that the company devotes to get these projects working. We face this challenge with Alaska that I don't think many Alaskans, and certainly the people, the decision makers in Washington, D.C. don't really comprehend, is the amount of money it takes to do business in Alaska, number one, and the amount of time and effort it takes to bring a project to production. So the GMT2 was about 9 years of investment before you start getting oil. And that's a real commitment of money when you're talking, billions of dollars in investment, and then you wait 9 years to start recovering your revenue. But again, if you look at the top of the slide, of course, there's Prudhoe Bay to the right, and then the Kuparuk field with the 3 central processing facilities, 1, 2, and 3. And then the area in the middle, that's Oil Search property or Santos property. That's the Pica project. And then the green is the Narwhal project I mentioned. And then there's the Colorado River unit, which is Alpine. And then there's the GMT2 unit. And then further to the left or to the west is the Willow unit. And then, of course, the tangerine color is area under lease. And then the darker outline, those are all prospects. So, Conoco also has a lot of acreage under lease that were in development. There's seismic work going on down in Bear. There's seismic work going on over in Harpoon. And we don't have exploration scheduled for this winter because the winter was really originally scheduled to be Willow development, but because of litigation, we'll talk a little bit about later, litigation sort of delayed the Willow project. But the exploration will actually start doing assessment wells in Harpoon and Bear will be probably 23 and 24. So it kind of gives you a vision over the horizon into the future and the amount of work that's still possible on the North Slope. Next slide, please. So this gets you down, drills in a little bit more to where those projects that I mentioned. Just if you start, and this is where we like to bring in also the fact, that Prudhoe Bay is still producing, and Hillcorp has really done an exemplary job of really increasing production in Prudhoe Bay as well as lowering costs. And there's now starting to look for additional development projects in Prudhoe Bay. And then if you go again into the Kuparuk River unit, you can see where Eastern News is up to the northeast. You've got the Nuna project and the Coyote project in the Kuparuk River unit. And then you go to the Colville River unit. We've got Fjord West. I mentioned that's where the Doyon 26 is. And then we've got a project going on that CD4X where it's doing some pad expansion and will increase the number of wells on that pad. And then, of course, there's the Narwhal, what we call Colville Delta pad number 8. And that's a future project that will again come in. And the oil is a combination of NPRA, state, and Cupic land. And then, of course, you can see where GMT2 is there. But this one drills down a little bit more. It gives you an exact sort of spatial understanding of where the projects are. And so, we think that if these projects all are able to come into development and into operation, we'll still be able to produce about 450,000 barrels per day, and that's in 10 years from now. So the potential to continue, robust production on the slope is there. There's no question. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that I think really tells a story of as we move into how the slope was developed. So if you look at the graph on the right, it has the timeline of the Alpine project. And so the blue shade is what was expected Alpine to produce when they did what they call AFEs, or authorized for expenditure, or the final investment decision back in 2000, when Colville Delta 1 and Colville Delta 2 first came online. And so the blue was the original expectation of the production out of that field. And then the black line was what they thought how it would go. And then as you continue on, you can see how, exploration and development has continued to extend the life of that field. And so you see that the darker gray is when CD3 and CD4 came online. And then you had CD5. Many of you guys worked on CD5. That came in 2015. And so the orange is the extension there. And then you've got the GMT1 and GMT2 extension where we're in production about that now. And then we've got CD8, I believe, and then the Narwhal, which is expected to come on later in 26, 27. So it just goes to show you that these, what we call these hub, once you put a processing facility in place and you get a hub established, then you just continue to utilize the resources around it that bring those smaller reservoirs that add value, and you can continue to use the existing infrastructure. So you can see on the right-hand side, originally it was 430 million barrels of oil, and today it's produced over 600, with 600 remaining. And they anticipate another 20 years of production out of the Alpine unit. So that just goes to sort of build on what, as we move further west. So next slide, please. And so, again, so the GMT2 is about as far out as we're going to use that Alpine facility. So, this is another milestone that we hit. We hit first oil in late December, but really started turning on full time in January. And again, it's another project that the company is very proud of. It's the third development in the NPRA, and it continues to produce above expectation. Again, each time we move further west, each time we put a new facility in place, it has less impact. It's more sustainable. We got 36 wells coming from the pad exists there. There's a pipeline, and there's water coming from a lick talk being pumped all the way through from the Alpine facility for water injection. And it's a roadless development. That's one of the things I forgot to mention, is that everything across west of the Colville River is a roadless development, because even though you see the pipelines there, but there is no road, no permanent bridge across Colville Delta. There's ice roads that are in, for instance, now, where they mobilize a lot of the heavy equipment, but it's served by airplane and ice road. That's it. And if you think about that in terms of sustainable development and being able to run that for 20 years and another 20 years on the horizon, or probably 40 more years, it's really a feat we in Alaska sometimes take for granted, where I think we should be more proud of the fact that we do development with minimal impact in the Arctic environment. We sometimes we know that in the national arena, there's all this discussion about development in the Arctic, but we've been developing the Arctic for 50 years and doing it safely and doing it with the priorities that Alaskans have at the forefront. and we kind of get overlooked. And so we know that we're working with the ASRC and the North Slope residents to be more vocal about that, and to be able to say development in the Arctic has the Alaskans have benefited from it. The nation has benefited from it. Certainly the residents of the North Slope have benefited to improve their standard of living in their lives. And most people realize that. We just need to be better at how we present that. Next slide, please.
Certainly the way development, we sometimes see it happening in other localities and other jurisdictions. Our North Slope is a radical success story.
It really is. And like I said, and it goes across the entire spectrum, from whether it's sustainable environmental development, whether it's utilization of technology to lower costs, whether it's, the new talk of social justice, equitable justice for the residents. I mean, we've done it already in Alaska, from the establishment of the Alaska regional corporations and the 7I, 7J revenue sharing programs, to the NPRA NPRA mitigation impact fund. I mean, it just goes across every spectrum. Alaska has always been at the forefront of development into this century, and will continue to be. So I think we're always under pressure and we're always under criticism about it, but it's by those that really don't take the time to understand the accomplishment that we've succeeded with it on the North Slope. So here's where the Willow is, and if you remember sort of the positioning of where it was, it's about 28 air miles west of the GMT2 pad, southwest, and you can see what it is. It's a significantly competitive resource. What I mean by that competitive is what it will take to develop it versus what we expect to recover from it. It leverages the infrastructure that we have in place at Alpine in terms of being able to move that product through the Alpine pipeline into the Kapark pipeline, and then over to Pump Station 1. At peak production, it'll be about 160,000 barrels a day. So if you think about that, what we said in the beginning, that our daily production from all the North Slope for ConocoPhillips assets is about 190,000. So it will be about an 80% increase to ConocoPhillips production. Even with the challenges that we have right now with litigation, engineering and design work is moving ahead full force. There's estimated over 2,000 jobs over the 6-year construction cycle, and over 400 permanent jobs, with about 9 million construction man hours to build that facility. BLM estimates that, and these are BLM estimates that came through the environmental impact statement, estimate over 10 billion in future monetary benefits to the state, to the North Slope borough communities, as well as to the federal government through production tax, through royalty, and through property tax. So the project right now is, we're in a draft environmental impact statement period. So now between now and March 9th, there's an opportunity for individuals to make comment in the draft environmental impact statement. So it's kind of we're sort of in an unexplored or unexperienced regulatory position, because it's scoping. It's called an informal scoping period for a draft environmental impact statement, a draft supplemental environmental impact statement. And so a supplemental doesn't require scoping, but yet they've branded this period, what we're in right now, as informal scoping. And so what does that mean? It's for those of us that don't really understand the regulatory world and all the legal terms, it's really just a way for the agency, for the BLM, to tell the opposition that, yeah, we're gonna give you this period of time to listen to your concerns, and then we will incorporate them into the supplemental draft environmental impact statement if we think if they think we have merit. And so what we're doing right now is we're asking people that are supportive of the project to also submit comments. And we have, Jomo's got some talking points that we sent to him. We've got on our webpage, we've got this webpage called Power and Cooperation that has all the information about Willow, that if you want to learn about Willow, that's where you should go. Go to the ConocoPhillips, or just Google in Power and Cooperation ConocoPhillips, and it will take you to this information page. And so if you're so inclined, if you want to make a comment to the BLM, you go to the BLM's e-planning website. And it just, again, all you need to do is sort of Google in e-planning at BLM, and then you can upload a comment about, and the comment could be, Willow Project has gone through rigorous environmental review, no need to delay it any longer. It could be, it could be, the Willow Project will benefit the state of Alaska and benefit the North Slope residents. So it could be the Willow Project, is a continued example of sustainable development on the North Slope. But again, we're asking supporters and people that will be involved with the Willow Project to take the opportunity to express that to the BLM, because we're trying to balance the scales in the BLM, because you can guarantee that the environmental organizations, and they're recruiting people to say what a demonic project it is and how it's going to destroy the Arctic environment, and they're going to use all the rhetoric to try to get the BLM to stop the project. And so this is our effort to try to get people that support the project and understand the importance of resource development in Alaska, and that we do it well, and that we've been doing it well for a long time, and that we hold all of those objectives at the forefront of our planning, of our execution, and that we continue to keep in mind the needs of the North Slope residents, keep in mind the impact on the wildlife on the North Slope. And so if you're so inclined to do it, we'd appreciate it. That's March 9th deadline. Again, Jomo has that information. If you need anything else, feel free to contact me as we go. So next slide, please.
And just so you know, sir, I did just post the ConocoPhillips page that you referenced, as well as the BLM e-planning site that you referenced, both in the chat.
Oh, great. Perfect. So sort of back to some of the challenges that everybody that operates on the North Slope that we face here in Alaska, as we look at Alaska compared to the competition in other oil producing regions of the world. And this slide really just drives it home, because if you look at some of the other areas of the world that have the lifting costs, and you guys are pretty sophisticated in understanding what the lifting costs is to get the oil out of the ground and into the transportation infrastructure. And it's just and then we look at the transportation costs that the North Slope experiences because of the tariff to get it from the Arctic down to water, and then of course what it costs to get it from Valdez to market. So when you look at that blue wedge, most people forget that production in Alaska is so different than it is in the Permian Basin in Texas or North Dakota or even in Saudi Arabia, because nowhere else in the world do the oil producing basins house people, feed people, transport them to work, provide the power generation, provide the fuel. We have to bring the fuel to the North Slope. So it's so much different. The production environment is so different compared to anywhere else. For instance, in the lower 48. In the lower 48, if they want to put in an unconventional well, they'll drive down a county road. They may build a little bit of a road off a county road. They'll hook into a utility power grid, and they'll connect their electric motors to a utility, and they'll buy power from an existing power producer. Their crew will drive from work back and forth to the pad. So the cost associated with the North Slope infrastructure is just so dramatically different. And sometimes I think that even in Alaska, we forget about that in comparison to other producing regions. Probably the one that's closest to ours is, of course, northern Canada in the tar sands. You could say, okay, well, they're doing it in the Russian Far East, but the facilities and how those people live in the Russian Far East doesn't even compare. It's nowhere near what we provide in the standard of care and the standard of employee attention that we put in for the North Slope. So to me, this really drives home the challenge that we have in Alaska to remain competitive, to place our barrels in the market. We also have, the political risk. I mean, if you look at the global oil production regimes around the world, political risk is no question has a lot of, it's high on the list of evaluation. But we in Alaska, we have other political risks. We don't have political risk in terms of unstable regimes. We have political risk in terms of fiscal policy. And we have political risk in terms of external pressures about the Arctic sensitivities and about the new ESG movement, the access to capital, and now that we have certain sectors of society that are actually criticizing financial institutions that invest in projects, so they're arm's length away, and they're still being criticized for it. So the challenges we face are new challenges, but again, we just need to be upfront and say we do it, and we do it better than anybody else. We have the right priorities in mind. We have the most stringent regulatory environment that we operate under, and we do it well. We've been doing it well for 50 years. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting graph that we'd like to show, again, sort of where the government take is Alaska compared to other regions of the world. It's kind of hard to read, especially if you're like me, I don't have the glasses on. But you can see where we stand in terms of globally, but you can also see where we stand in terms of some of the other U.S. states and the state producers. We're competitive, but any change to the fiscal regime is going to have an impact on the attraction of capital, and that attraction of capital is what keeps oil flowing. Next slide, please. So we're coming near the end of this presentation now. So again, ConocoPhillips and its legacy businesses, ARCO, before that, the Richfield Company, long association in Alaska. This is the continuous investment in the community. The Alaska Business Unit, as a part of ConocoPhillips, has the largest community investment program. We contribute pretty consistently over about $5 million a year into the communities across the state. We're the largest contributor to the University of Alaska over the history of involvement on the North Slope. So, we're a part of the community. You can see where a lot of the investment goes: social services, education, natural resource education, civic. So this is just really a piece that ConocoPhillips employees are proud to sort of reinvest and be a part of the community. And this doesn't even include the man hours of volunteer work that the employees do. Next slide, please. So I don't know if we're going to show the video. Is that what we're going to do, Jomo, I know a lot of you guys have been to the North Slope, but this is the end of the presentation with a new modern. Most of this footage was taken earlier this year by drone. So is that, can you play that, Jomo?
Hey, Rick, do you have can your question wait for the video?
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, then yes, let's give it a shot.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Oh, you need to unmute, Miss Boys.
Uh-oh. There she is. Maybe the video won't work. Maybe.
We got a lot of people on today.
There we go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hear you, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, now I know the video will work as soon as I can press the go button. There we go. Okay.
So I forgot to mention one part there, Jomo, is that, again, that video, brings in the fact that, ConocoPhillips has its own airline to fly employees back and forth. Many of you might remember the old shared services agreement between BP and Conoco and Exxon. But both of those entities, have pulled out in terms of operational portion. Of Exxon's still an owner, but not an operator. Of course, BP exited the state. So we were forced, Conoco was forced to come up with a solution. So they bought 3 of these aircraft from Horizon and essentially operated their own airline to get employees and contractors to the North Slope. So that's just another example of the challenges that most people overlook, is that what other oil company around actually operates in airlines. But anyway, Rick, you had a comment?
I did. Thanks, Ben. Always great to see the work that's happening on the slope. So just kind of focused in on Willow and what's going on in our world now. Is there a recognition, do you think, by the agency, that'd be BLM, of really the need for American oil? And do you think that will reflect itself at all in this revisiting of the permit? And then I guess I'm just wondering about the next steps that I assume include litigation by folks, even once BLM completes its supplementary EIS.
So I think that, to answer the first part of your question, I think the answer to that is yes. I think that certainly the geopolitical conflicts that are happening in the Ukraine highlight the fact that the importance of U.S. production for national security. It certainly raises that awareness, and that, that for the first time in a long time, we're actually, hearing vocal support for increased production off federal lands. And of course, we know that, the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska has been around for a long time, and we're producing from it now, and it can produce for a long time in the future. So I think the answer to your question is yes, it is having an impact externally. Whether it has an impact, on the decision makers in this process. I mean, the decision makers in this process really are very narrow, right? So we're in the agency. The Willow Master Development Plan was developed by BLM Alaska, and BLM Alaska knows its obligation, knows its duty, and their obligation is to utilize federal land and the resources off federal land. So we have a very integral cooperative working agreement with BLM Alaska on this project. They're working to get it to completion, and they're on the timeline, working with us on our timelines. We want the timeline for the record of decision to be done by the end of this year, so we can have a construction cycle in 22-23 winter, and to begin it, because first oil expectation is first oil will come 6 years after we lay down the first gravel for that project. So, and we know that if we don't get gravel down in the winter of 22-23, it's going to be another delay. Of course, the opposition knows that as well, and so the opposition, they're working on the other end of the decision making process, which is Department of Interior and the Biden administration. Congress is out of this picture. Congress has an ability to be an influencer between our congressional delegation and how they can apply pressure to the agency, Department of Interior. But really, the decision makers are the Secretary of Interior, and they have to approve the project that BLM Alaska pushes forward for them. And we're pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to work through that process. It went through the process before. Many people forget that it was originally the project was designed and built under the Obama administration. It just so happened that it was approved under the Trump administration. And then it went to court, and then we went to federal court, and the court remanded it back to the agency and said, correct these deficiencies in your plan. And so the BLM Alaska is working hard with industry, with Conoco, to get those issues addressed. And will we again face litigation? We're pretty sure we will, regardless of what the decision comes out of the agency. But the challenge, like many of us know, in any federal permit now is making sure that permit can sustain itself through the litigation process. That's kind of a long answer, Rick. I don't know if I gave you anything you don't know.
Yeah, that is a good answer, Ben. I appreciate it, and we just hope and trust that the solid work done with the permit and the engagement and record of Conoco, that'll all prevail. And so we're hopeful and excited. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and look, I can't overemphasize, what individual comments, how they weigh in. They're very impactful in this process right now. And it could be from a small contracting company. It could be from an individual. It could be from and any way it's tied into the benefit of the project, into a comment, into the record, has an impact. And so I would just try to encourage all of you to sort of take the time look, it's going to benefit all of us in the end if we can all sort of weigh in on this project.
Mr. Burgraff.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. You've done an excellent job. One thing that we really haven't stressed and it needs to be brought out is the fact that we do it better. When you look at Russia's record of protecting the environment and doing things in the right way, it's been dismal. And actually, it just really rubs me the wrong way, the way the Biden administration is trying to shut down operations in the Arctic, in Alaska, when we do it the right way I think that's a point that we need to reemphasize and tell, Congress and the regulators and the world that if we're allowed to develop our resources up here, we're all going to benefit, and so is the environment. And it really disturbs me with the environmental groups that want to shut everything down in Alaska, and by not imposing restrictions on the Russians for what they're doing in Yugoslavia and in the Ukraine, it just really bothers me. And so keep up the good work, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I certainly agree with everything you said, and we all just need to do a better job of making people aware of the fact that I think a lot of people don't even know what we've accomplished on the North Slope and the challenges that we've met along the way. I'm in Valdez today, and there's this statue, down in the Valdez terminal that says, when they completed the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, which was, really the eighth wonder of the world for a lot of people, it says, we didn't know it couldn't be done. I mean, it's really, that's just the way that we've been successful in doing it here. And we just need to do a better job about making people aware and pushing back. And I'm sort of jaded on the opinion, that the environmental groups use us just to raise money. I mean, and it raises money for them, and we just need to push back and educate the decision makers the best we can. And that it's always been that way for us in Alaska, and it always will be. And we just need to go in with an arsenal ready to demonstrate that we've done it well, and we're going to continue to do it well, and it benefits not just us but the nation. So I think I agree with you, Jomo. Appreciate your time. I'm here for any more questions if you have any more. And I appreciate everybody's time.
All right, thank you, sir. I will open it up to questions. We do have a couple of more minutes. Then thank you so much for the offer. Are there any further questions? While we wait for them to percolate up, I do have a question. Well, ConocoPhillips is a world-class company, as is Exxon and BP. But my recollection is that again, ConocoPhillips, we're a much bigger feather in the cap of ConocoPhillips than, say, either historically for Exxon or British Petroleum. How do we sit here in Alaska relative to the rest of ConocoPhillips holdings? I feel like we're fairly important.
Yeah, there's no question that I've been here for a year now and sort of got to understand their global strategy. They like diversification in their portfolio, and the company is growing rapidly, and it's really just an exploration and production company that's not a downstream refiner. So they're very focused on regions of the world that have potential for continued growth. They're moving assets continually. For instance, they just sold out of Malaysia. excuse me, they sold out of Indonesia and bought into Malaysia. They bought more gas areas around Australia, and they made significant acquisitions and purchases of acreage in the Permian Basin. But Alaska is the conventional portion of the portfolio. You know, we're about right now we believe that we're about 18% of the global portfolio. I don't think you're going to see them get too diversified, but I mean, look, the current CEO, Ryan Lance, many of you might remember him. He's you know, grew up in the Alaska development. He's the guy that brought the Alpine project into existence. He knows Alaska's potential. He understands the challenges that we have with the regulators and with the landowners, but he also knows that once you get a project underway in Alaska, it has a long life and also has a lot of ability to you know, do like what Alpine did, the Alpine expansion project. So, you know, I think we're in a good place at the time being with the existing fiscal regime. But I mean, I'm telling you, if something happens that changes the fiscal dynamics and the legislature wants to change the tax or increase or take, I mean, there's lots of places in the world to go. And, you know, we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4 of the majors exit, right? Chevron, Shell, BP, and Exxon's not operating anymore. You know, Pioneer left, Anadarko left. So, you know, ConocoPhillips has sort of staked a position here, and we know how to operate here. We've been doing it for a long time. The people here that operate in the North Slope, they're Alaskans. They understand what it takes. But at the same time, we have to compete for investment with the global portfolio within the corporate boardroom. And in order to do that, we got to show that the projects are competitive and that we can make it work in terms of their requirements. And it doesn't take much of a tweak to turn that off and turn it the other way. So it's important for all of us to know that, you know, during the down cycle, Conoco continued to invest in Alaska, and now we're in an up cycle. And for those of us that you guys have been following, have been here long enough to understand that, you know, now that we're in an up cycle, you hear the voice from Juneau say, well, they're in record profits, we need to take more. But I got to tell you, when we were losing money and still paying taxes and royalties, that nobody in Juneau was saying we got to give them their money back. So that was probably a little. You might want to erase that part of the recording. But
certainly, it shows the importance of us to ConocoPhillips portfolio shows, and it shows in your investments and your commitment to the state and its development, and it's appreciated. All right. Well, anyone, we're past the top of the hour, but again, we do have another moment. If anyone has any further questions. All right. Well, again, Vice President Stevens, very much appreciated. Ms. Boyes, thank you for your assistance. Again, I'll give you a couple more seconds in the chat box. If you'd like to get more information regarding the Willow Project, again, that link is in the chat, as well as for those who are wishing to make public comment relative to the BLM and this continuing review of the project. That link is also in the chat box.
Yep.
Well, all right, everybody. Again, well, thank you. Happy March 1st. Again, safe travels to you, Mr. Vice President. I don't know what the weather was like down there in Valdez, but we got dumped on. So I hope everything's good for you all down there. Safe travels. And I want to say, who is our presenter for next week? I believe we actually have a couple of presentations lined up for next week. Let's see. Yes, we have an Alaska Railroad update on Tuesday of next week. But we also have a special engagement, just so everyone knows. We are going to be, just like we just offered the chamber to go ahead and participate in our meeting today. The chamber has offered to allow us to participate in a meeting they're having next week. It's going to be March 10th. Meeting starts a little early, starts at 7 a.m., but it is Kinross to discuss the Mancho project. So go ahead and mark your calendars. Again, we'll have a double up next week. We'll have our normal meeting where we'll be having an update from the Alaska Railroad, but then a special meeting on March 10th, Thursday, March 10th at 7 a.m. in partnership with the Chamber Transportation Infrastructure Committee relative to Kinross and the Mancho project. Boy, everybody, I hope you've had found this as informative as I have. It's amazing. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. See you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jomo.
Very